All right. I'm going to talk about two aspects of technology today, both in our personal lives and then also in the classroom. So we'll start out with one and then move to the other. The year is 1998. My dad got a new work computer, which meant that we got his old one as kids. And for the first time, my family had a computer for kids' use that had an internet connection. We were homeschooled, and I was starting to take a couple of online classes, so it was important that we had access to the internet, as well as word processors and all of that to write out our papers and stuff. I remember so clearly the many talks that my parents and us had about computer safety. Our computer was in the middle of our music room, which was right next to the living room and next to the kitchen. We often had siblings practicing the piano, my mom cooking in the kitchen. It was a very busy space. We could only go online with permission, and it was dial-up on our one phone line, so it's not like sneaking that was very easy. We were never, ever to use the computer when mom and dad weren't home or after they had gone to bed. Social media didn't exist, but we were allowed to go into pre-approved like chat room type forums on specific topics that interested us with other kids. I really liked ones on horses. That was my thing. I still remember posting and talking with people about it. We were never to tell anyone our names, where we lived, how old we were, or anything personal about ourselves, much less share a picture if that was even possible. Despite the other precautions of being in the middle of the house with our siblings in the middle of the day, our parents always checked the browser history afterwards. And I'm sure a lot of this sounds familiar to you who grew up with computers as well. So I ask you, in the last 20 years, has the internet gotten safer? Has the objectionable or unsafe content lessened? Have dangerous people, victimizers, child abusers decided that the internet is useless to them and have gone away? No. And since that time, we have also invented whole new areas of incredibly powerful media that didn't even exist, with streaming video and social media, which were non-existent when I was in high school, are now the world's most powerful communication tools. And it is all sitting in ours and our children's pockets on an entirely private device that many parents let their kids go to bed with. Why? What's changed? My goal this afternoon is not to scare or shock or bore you with statistics, though I will use a lot of them. It's not to create a boogeyman or a big bad that we all have to be scared about or worry more about. But it is to tell you what we are seeing as teachers and to share with you what experts are seeing in ourselves and our teenagers, and to talk about how our internet habits, particularly on our phones, seems to be deeply changing the course of our lives, our brains, and our families. I do this because mindfulness is our greatest tool towards building a good life, and part of our job as adults with kids is to help them navigate waters that are too deep and with too powerful a current for them to handle alone. So let's talk about the internet. In the last 20 years, the internet has changed nearly every aspect of how we live. It has transformed our work through email and websites. It has changed our record keeping, our medicine. It's changed the way we shop. I have never banked without the internet. I don't know how. Like if the internet were to crash, I would have no money. I would have no way of knowing how much money I have. Like I have no idea. Yesterday, my brother-in-law scared me about not having enough soap in the house, and so I got on Amazon and I ordered hand soap and hand sanitizer, and that's what I do. The rapid rise of the internet has brought about immense changes, many of which are very good. Our productivity in our work has skyrocketed. We are seeing advances in countless fields due to the power of the internet, the cloud, connectivity in general, and of course, social media. Social media is truly amazing. I got a Facebook account in college and an Instagram account almost 10 years ago, and it is hard for me to imagine my life without it. My move to Texas, where I had left everyone that I knew and got up and moved 1,300 miles away, My engagement, my wedding, the birth of my children, all have been properly documented and shared on social media because that is the way that I still connect with most of the community that I grew up with. I still have childhood friends, college friends, grad school friends, friends who live in California who moved far away, that we all get to talk like all the time. And it's kind of amazing and wonderful. Better yet, I have watched my niece and my nephews grow up, even though they live in Southern California. I witness daily moments in their life and in the life of my parents and sisters. And I get to share with them our life here in Texas in ways that would not have been possible without Facebook and Instagram, much less like FaceTime. FaceTime is just this incredible technology where I've got 2-year-old nephews and a 6-year-old niece, and I get to see them about 3 times a year. But when I see them in person, it feels as if we live next door to each other. And I cannot value that more highly. Like, it's my favorite thing that my children know and love their grandparents who all live very far away because they feel like they're interacting with them face to face. It's so valuable. It's really hard for me to imagine what it would be like to lose that connection, and I don't want to. Though experiencing it in my own life, I have not in the past properly recognized the absolutely massive shift and the swift change the internet has brought about into our lives. To give you a sense of how fast smartphone technology alone took off, it was 2007 when the first iPhone was released, and by 2012, a mere 5 years after its introduction, 50% of Americans owned a smartphone. I mean, that's amazing. And that smartphone use in particular set off a seismic shift in our relationship with the world. I have focused on positives so far, but I don't intend to for very long because we all see the benefits. Like, it's very easy to know and recognize the benefits of the internet and our smartphone, and kids see it too. Since the rise of the smartphone, teenagers are safer, physically safer. They get into less trouble. They get arrested less. They party less. Pregnancies are down from what they have been for several generations, which sounds all like a great thing, and it is in many ways, but it's because they do not leave their house, which has a lot of problems associated with it as well. A Pew Research study on phone use in teenagers reported smartphone ownership has become nearly ubiquitous, an element of teen life. 95% of teenagers now report that they either own their own smartphone or have regular access to one. These mobile connections are in turn fueling more persistent online activities. 45% of teenagers say that they are online in a near constant basis. The same study showed that 72% of teenagers check their smartphones the moment they get up. And this is an unrelated statistic, but the same number. 72% of parents report that their teen is distracted in daily conversation because of their phone. So 95% of students have access to a phone, and over 70%, that is the first thing they do in the morning, is check that phone. Most interestingly to me, only 31% of teenagers self-report that smartphone ownership is positive. Only 30% think of it as a good thing, which means that 69% of teenagers believe that it is best neutral, and 24% of those say that it is actively harmful. A quarter of teenagers think that their smartphones are harming them, and only 5% of parents think the same thing. What does that mean? Like, what are teenagers seeing about their own online activity that we parents are not seeing? Because parents think of it as a pretty positive thing. Pew Research again tells us, despite concerns about what teens may encounter online, the vast majority of parents believe that the internet is generally very beneficial for their children. 67% of parents think that teens online is a good thing, up from 55% in December of 2000, which is an increase of 53% of parents. And again, only 5% actually think of it as a bad thing. This statistic has always shocked me, and I think Mr. Yee might have alluded to it earlier, But the average teenager has about 6 hours a day of leisure time. So when you account for homework and getting ready and school and all that, they still got about 6 hours. I think if you're in great books class, that's probably cut down a little bit. And the average student also spends half of that online. Boys spend an hour more than girls do. I think because of video games. I think that's my guess, is because video game use is like universal. It's like 98% of boys play video games. And so I think that's partly where that statistic comes from. So why is it significant that 3 hours a day would be spent online? Because it is not just teenagers self-reporting that's seeing negative trends. The average teenager is spending 3 hours a day online. What is this doing to their minds and their bodies and their souls? We kind of don't know yet because this isn't a long-term thing. I mean, it's only really been as universal as it has been for about 5 to 6 years. But there are early indications and early studies, and it's not good. Teenagers spending 3 or more hours a day on electronics have a 35% higher chance of a suicide risk factor. And 8th graders using social media specifically frequently have 27% higher risk of depression, according to a psychology professor, Jean Twenge, who's studied internet and social media use in teenagers. Her area of interest is teenage and young adults in general. And I'm going to spend a while on her report because it's fascinating. The Journal of Preventative Medicine found that young people who spend 7 hours or more a day on screens are more than twice as likely to be diagnosed with depression or anxiety than those who use screens for an hour a day. 7 hours may sound like a lot, but if we remember that the average teenager is spending half their leisure time online, which is about 3 hours, if your school is using technology, it would be very easy to get to 7 hours a day. Really, really easy. Teens, by the way, are very, very aware of this potential for damage and see it, I think, pretty clearly. When asked about spending too much time online, roughly 90% of teens say that it is a problem facing their age groups, including 60% who say that is a major problem. The evidence is clear that spending too much time online is causing students to be depressed, anxious, and ironically, lonely. Deeply lonely. And they see it. As I mentioned a minute ago, psychology professor Jean Twenge is a research specialist in teenage and young adult behavior. A few years ago, Twenge noticed monumental and sudden changes in teenage and young adult behavior starting suddenly in 2012, which is the year, remember, that 50% of Americans got a smartphone. The group born between 1995 and 2012, she has dubbed iGen. It is markedly different from all previous generations, and she believes this is due to the increase of smartphones and social medias. She says, "It is not an exaggeration to describe iGen as being on the brink of the worst mental health crisis in decades. Much of this deterioration can be traced to their phones." Twenge wrote, "Around 2012, I noticed abrupt shifts in teen behavior and emotional states. The gentle slopes of line graphs became mountains and cliffs, and many of the distinctive characteristics of the millennial generation disappeared. In all my analysis of generational data, some reaching back to the 1930s, I had never seen anything like it. Even when a seismic event, a war, a technology leap in times past, a free concert in the mud, plays an outside role in shaping a group of young people as they have, no single factor has ever defined a generation. Parenting styles continue to change, as do school curricula and culture, and these things matter. But the twin rise of the smartphone and social media has caused an earthquake of a magnitude we have never seen. There is compelling evidence that the devices we've placed in young people's hands are having profound effects on their lives and making them seriously unhappy." So why aren't adults paying more attention? this is where I feel a really strong need to get people to pay attention to what's happening with their youth and with ourselves, because I don't think adults are excused from this, but it's particularly powerful to the teenage mind. And I hope to share with you a little bit of what we see on a daily basis. Teenagers, even the happy ones, are at constant risk of a myriad of life-altering issues and crisis, and it's really, really hurting them. In my 8 years of teaching, the amount of coarse, crass, demeaning talk from boys about girls has skyrocketed. Our boys are good boys, and yet they're simply joking. They're repeating what they hear. And it's awful. It's awful. And it's oftentimes hard to convince them that it's awful because they're so used to it. They don't even realize, and I've had to tell this to girls, I've had to tell girls to stop putting up with it. No boy in my life has talked to me like that. And you guys think it's normal. And it's devastating. Children are designed to be imitators. It is in their DNA. It's their nature because God wants them imitating you. That's why you're their parents. He does not want them imitating some YouTube star or, God forbid, porn star. They will imitate, however, and they will imitate what they spend the most time on and are most impressed by. If your kid is spending 7 hours a day on their smartphone, computer, tablet, or even 5 or 3 or 1 hour, they are going to imitate what they see. The benefit of being online just 1 hour is that there are 23 other hours in the day in which they're being influenced by the people in their actual lives. Their parents, their friends, their teachers, their pastors, their priests and spiritual advisors. These are the people that you have carefully provided for them. And yet they won't get the benefit of these relationships if they're online all the time. And instead, we are inundating them with a lot of stuff that even when we do our very best to control, we cannot control. Filters. I was just talking to a parent the other day. They're considering moving to this school solely because of technology in the classroom and other places. She said that they have really strict filters and all sorts of securities in place, but the actual technology of Google Classrooms that gets used at the school is a workaround for their filters so that they can get to YouTube through it because they have to for school, but now all of YouTube is accessible to you. And so this kid he's a nice kid. He was using it to watch slow-mo videos. That's what he told me. He was really interested in slow-mo videos, but it's just kind of a waste of time, right? That's what they're concerned with. But he did tell me about a really cool one where a ninja guy could put a needle through glass and have it pop a balloon on the other side. I was like, that sounds awesome. And I don't blame you for trying to watch it when you're supposed to be doing your homework, but this is why we have to protect them. The internet, and especially social media, this is so important. And Chris, you alluded to it earlier in your talk too. A kid or anyone can curate or create the world that they want to see. If you decide that you are really a squirrel in a teenage girl's body, you can find other squirrelkin out there to validate this great discovery. And I wish I was making that one up, but I am not. That is a real example. It comes from direct experience. Or perhaps more commonly, if you feel like you don't fit in, your parents don't understand you, you feel sad all the time, or wonder if you're not really a man or a woman. All of these doubts and fears can be taken to the internet and find a willing and ready audience. And these are not bad sites. These are Facebook, these are Instagram, these are Tumblr. These are easy sites that you can just find a community ready to embrace whatever bad idea you've just had. It's incredibly simple to create an echo chamber telling you that your parents don't really love you, or that Christianity is crazy, that you're a squirrel, or that the reason that you're sad and confused is because maybe you're homosexual and you never even realized it. These are easy things for these communities to kind of rally around and bring your kid in. I have only ever been part of great Christian schools, institutions I am very proud of, full of amazing, great, thoughtful, and very well-supported kids, with parents who love them and care about them. And I want you to keep in mind when I tell you that the amount of gender dysphoria, sexual identity questions, extreme depression, suicidal thoughts, suicide attempts, self-hatred, online bullying, it is rising every day, and we see it every day, and it is devastating. And it is always traceable with very few and traumatic exceptions to online experience. In my personal experience as a school administrator, I've had 2 incidents of attempts of strangers on the internet to lure children away from their families that were caught just in time. And we've had to hold people's phones because it was too dangerous for them to have a phone during the school day. These are wonderful parents who caught their families, their kids just in time. But obviously great emotional damage had already been done. The internet has not grown safer. We have just grown less diligent. Whenever I'm dealing with an extremely troubled or depressed student, the first thing I can count on is that they spend too much time on their phone. And the first thing I want to do is rip it from their hands, tie a millstone around it, and throw it into the sea. We have placed all the evil, disorienting, confusing, depressing, and scary things in the world in our children's pockets, and we've called it good. I'm going to transition to tech in the classroom, but I think I've had dozens of experiences where significant harm is being done to students who are already vulnerable because of very looking like casual experiences online. And I think it's only on the rise. So a different but important issue is how we use our tech in the classrooms. As you know, the school has a pretty firm stance on tech in the classroom and phone use in general, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the phone use stuff when we get down towards the end. But it paints a different but similar picture. The National Education Association, quoting UCLA education professor Noel Eddy, called classroom tech an era of unfulfilled promises. Promises of personalized instruction via computer screens and online textbooks has resulted in what they said as no perceivable benefit to the student, despite enormous claims. Though Eddy and the NEA think teachers should still incorporate tech in the classroom, it is because we need to keep up with the times and not because it has of yet shown any, and this is a direct quote, any significant advance in learning objectives. The Advocate, a national publication for public educators, focused on increased cheating potential as they wondered how to utilize tech in the classrooms without destroying everything. Strangely enough, having Google, cameras, texting, and chat rooms at your fingertips during tests does not lead to honest behavior. And it is super hard to sort of manage around that. Though people are always trying. It's really not the educator's fault. They are hopeful about the technology and really trying to find ways of utilizing it. I worked at a school that had a one-to-one computing environment, so everybody had a MacBook. And we were kind of a mess trying to utilize it. It was partly the teacher's fault, but the reading comprehension plummeted because we teach ourselves to scroll on a screen. That's kind of what we do on Facebook. It's what we do in the news. I'm going to go on CNN and see how much I can find out really fast, right? That's not a great way to study. And so we have to shift our brains in ways that we don't seem to be quite capable of as humans. And even our president, Dr. Reynolds, who loves tech, has given up on e-readers because of the same thing. The comprehension just plummets and you can't remember it. So it goes beyond worries about cheating. MIT's publication Technology Review, and I want you just to note, Massachusetts Institute of Technology's publication Technology Review. These people love technology. It's their whole world. Definitively states that there is no evidence that technology in the classroom helps students. and that there is increasing evidence that it is furthering harming at-risk students. I'm going to quote them kind of for a little while in saying, a recent Gallup report found that 89% of students in the United States from 3rd to 12th grade say that they use digital learning tools in school at least a few days a week. Gallup also found near universal enthusiasm for technology on the part of educators. Among administrators and principals, 96 fully or somewhat support increased use of digital learning tools in the school, with almost as much support, about 85%, coming from teachers. But it is not clear that this hopefulness and fervor is based on evidence. When asked if there is a lot of information available about the effectiveness of the tools they used, only 18% of administrators and a quarter of teachers said yes. Another quarter of teachers said they had no information about whether or not it was beneficial. I think this is really telling. Enthusiasm and probably some very well-meaning hope, I mean, teachers need help out there, has really encouraged a rise of tech in schools. But it is an experiment, and it's a giant experiment with school children as the subjects, and the experiment isn't going well. The MIT article continues, much of the data shows a negative impact on a range of grade levels. A study of millions of high school students in the 36 member countries of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development found that those who used computers heavily at school, quote, do a lot worse in most learning outcomes, even after accounting for social background and demographics. According to other studies, college students in the US who use laptops or digital devices in the classroom do worse on exams. 8th graders who took Algebra 1 online did significantly worse than those who took the course in person. And 4th graders, and this one I think is really significant, 4th graders who used tablets in all or almost all of their classes had, on average, reading scores 14 points lower than those who had never used them, which is a differential of an entire grade level. In some states, the gap was much larger. Notice what that covers. Student outcomes adjusted for socioeconomic brackets and school type, college students, students in Algebra 1 specifically, elementary school students, all these types of students are suffering because of a giant experiment of how we use technology in school. And though hopeful about the role of tech in the classroom, teachers are noticing problems. A Pew Research Center survey found that nearly 90% of teachers believe that digital technologies were creating an easily distracted generation with short attention spans. About 60% said it hindered students' ability to write and communicate face-to-face, and almost half said it hurt critical thinking and their ability to do homework. 76% of teachers believe that students are being conditioned by the internet to find quick answers, leading to a loss of concentration. In the dozen or so studies, reports, and articles that I read, there's an odd tone of, well, it is here, so I guess we have to figure out how to make it useful. And this is absurd to me. I don't see a motivation, particularly for a school like ours, that gets to decide how we use our time. With no district or superintendent mandating use, why would we attempt to utilize technology that has no evidence that it increases learning outcomes and has increasing evidence that it actually harming students significantly, reducing reading levels by a full grade level when used frequently? An odd to me argument, though the one I hear most frequently, is that technology is such a ubiquitous part of life that we need to teach students how to use it. I do think students need to learn how to use technology. But let's consider what we're talking about when we're discussing the use of smartphones and laptops and tablets. We're talking about pieces of technology that are designed to be attractive, interesting, engaging, and in fact addictive. The UX, or user experience industry, is a massive part of the technological field. My brother-in-law that's what he does, is UX for a major company and their apps. One of my best friends does it for a particular app. The sole focus of that field is to make technology as pleasant and engaging as possible. We don't need to be concerned about students learning to use these devices. They're like the candy of the digital world. They are designed to be simple and addictive. No one ever needs to be taught how to drink alcohol. It is pleasant and addictive. I brilliantly managed all on my own without any adults teaching me. Yeah. But to take the analogy further, what the adults in kids' lives do need to do is to model proper use. The task before us is not to extensively inundate students with technology that hinders their mental health and ability to learn, but to help students limit their device use to necessary and profitable use, which there are some that we'll get to in just a minute, or even just healthy yet enjoyable use. I mean, it can still be a pastime or a pleasure as long as it's not extensive. I think one thing we need to recognize about tech in the classroom and tech for personal use is that when we are doing one thing, we are not doing something else. And this is a significant life principle for me and here at the school. We could incorporate technology into the classroom, but if we're doing that, we're not doing something else. And so is there a better use of our time? Right now, the answer is yes. There must be a better use of our time given the evidence. But I think that this is much more important when we look at our homes. What are we missing out on when we're on our phones in the classroom and at home? What are we not doing in the classroom if we were wasting time on tablets? What are we not doing in our homes if we were staring at a television, our phones, or our computer screens? And I think this is where we get to the real danger of overuse of technology. The reason why overuse makes us so depressed and use in the classroom makes us so dumb or unhelpful. The very first sentence of Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina says, "All happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way." I've always thought that this was one of the most untrue things ever put to page. Anyone who's been around a great deal of happy families, and I am very lucky to have been one of those people, knows that there is nothing more unique, quirky, funny, and individual than a happy family's private culture. The stories, the inside jokes, the family recipes, a shared love of weird music or board games, of a good fire or a stupid pet dog, all of these build up into a fabric of dynamic, joyful home life. There's something deeply satisfying to us as humans about a happy family life, something that reaches into our souls and tell us that things are going to be okay. It's why God put us into families. We weren't meant to be alone. And this is the thing I think we stand most to lose. Family culture comes about through boredom. It comes about through sitting together and figuring out what you're going to do. Your leisure time makes up some of the most significant parts of your family life. Now, what if we take away the cooking and the games, the songs, the conversations, the stories, and we all sit on our individual devices? It is so easy to do that. It's addictively easy to do it. And it's an enormous temptation, especially for teenagers. They're bored. They're bored of their parents. They're bored of their siblings. They have all their friends constantly at their fingertips, which is another thing that makes them very depressed, by the way. If you ever think about the kind of kids you hung out with in high school, and there was somebody who you didn't really like or who was a negative influence for you, but you didn't really know how to get away from them, now imagine being tethered to them 24/7 because they can constantly message you. This is a real problem for a lot of teenagers. They don't have that parent who says, stop, or you're coming home, or you're not hanging out with them right now, which is actually a relief. We have to help them limit themselves when they are too young to know how to do it well on their own. Remember, the average teenager has 6 hours of leisure time a day, and half of it on average is spent on their phones. If half of it on average is spent on their phones, they have a nearly 30% increase in suicidal tendencies. That's how powerful it is. So what's the solution? I have a couple of practical suggestions. For one thing, if your kid has a smartphone, treat it like a computer, not a phone. It is public access only. It is not for bedrooms or bathrooms or late nights. You use it in the living room with your siblings around. And then you, the parents, check your browser history, chat logs, and social media accounts, while keeping in mind that private browsing is a thing and there's not much you can do about it. Consider if your student actually needs a smartphone, or if a flip phone and a camera will do the same things of what they actually need. Even if they want to have social media and you're okay with that, you can have an Instagram account on a computer. You can have a Facebook account that just gets connected to it through a computer. I personally am praying for the day when we get a smartphone that is phone, maps, camera, and group chat and FaceTime. That's what I want. I don't want anything else. If you do have smartphones in your house, as we do in my family, aim for less than an hour of use a day. iPhones and probably other phones too have that screen time. It shows you how much you use your phone. I have struggled with this because if I'm on break in particular, I can't get under 3 hours a day, and I don't know how I'm doing it. It's that unconscious when I use my phone. And sometimes it's innocent stuff, like I'm looking up a recipe, but I bet a lot of it is just scrolling Instagram. Aim for less than an hour a day, because that is the key to having no depressive tendencies. If you're on your phone for less than an hour a day, and there's a particular kind of use too that makes a really big difference on social media. If you are an active user of social media, which means you're posting, you're interacting, that's all actually positive to our mental health. Now, I can imagine that there are political elements to that would grow negative very quickly, but if you're interacting with real people that you really know, or you're following accounts that contribute to your real life hobbies, those are all really positive, and those can have positive impacts if you're doing it less than an hour a day. It can increase your sense of well-being and connectedness. And the other thing I would suggest is for adults and teens too, is to hang up your phone. Treat it like an actual phone that you used to have a cord to and have to hang up and charge or whatever it did. I know the cords one didn't have to charge, but the other ones, the cordless ones, had to charge. Treat your phone like a real phone, one that you use for discrete purposes, like calling your mom, and then you hang it up away from your body, not in your pocket. I have mine in my pocket right now. My husband and I have a phone basket where the phones get put when we're not using them. And I really want to have that be something that all my guests do too, which I never have done because I always put the basket in a weird place. It's a dumb reason, but it's true. Your smartphone can serve the purpose of a phone and a computer. That's what makes them such great technology. But if you use it for those two purposes, like when you need a phone or when you need a computer, and not for an endless distraction machine, which it is perfectly happy to be. I remember distinctly a couple of times in my childhood, I had a very hands-on mom who was always with us, stay-at-home, homeschool mom. And she would have long phone conversations with my grandma or her brother or her friends, and I would feel so neglected, and which is insane, right? It should not have felt neglected, but I remember that feeling of Mom, why are you doing that? And can you imagine what our little children see when we're just looking at their phones instead of them? That they feel that. They know what that is, and it's significant to them. And then get living. Our families and our schools should be full of riches and a healthy dose of boredom. Creative games, sibling memories, even the ones that sound like fighting. Family culture, all of this comes from being together and being really together. One of the reasons that we banned the use of phones on our campus, and this is the primary one, in fact, it's not because of fear of pornography and all that stuff, which is real. But the primary reason that we banned it is because nobody was developing any relationships. If you have your phone with you and you're a new kid at a new school, well, how big is that temptation to just look at your phone, right? That's where your friends are, that's where your family are, that's safe. And I totally get that, but you'll never get out of it. And so we banned phone use so that people would have to talk to one another. And it's hard and awkward and gets really good fast if they can overcome some of that fear. Go play basketball, read a book, have a conversation, sing songs, run around outside. This is the stuff of real life, and it's the stuff we could lose if we're not really, really careful. Thank you.